more tried technology.
I think the answer, at least from as I would perceive for the city, I don't know for sure, but would be, again, a lot of this lighting retrofit has been a big push over the last half a dozen years, first of all, and second of all, still the lighting they put in is the cheapest type of lighting to put in, even though induction and LED are coming on. There's still a lot bigger cost with that. But there's been this bigger push. We've seen the margins narrow with regards to technology and cost over the years because of the push on the green side. I'd suspect that that's just a lot of it. It's just that was the cheapest way to get the lighting in without a lot of concerns about the savings and the paybacks.
The downside with what you currently have is wattage used, obviously. Replacements, because they're good for about 20 to 25,000 hours. And what we're proposing has a far better, it's called CRI, color rendering index, which means what you see under the light is more accurate to the colors that are there as opposed to other types of lighting that you have, whether it's high pressure sodium or metal halide. So there's lots of benefits to this type of lighting.
So what kind of lights do we currently have? Halogen?
You guys know that high pressure?
Depends on the location.
Just throughout the city, it's just different.
For street lights, it's mostly fluorescence.
Mm-hmm.
No. What they have currently. Is it high pressure sodium or metal halide?
Again, it depends on
Okay.
where you want to look. There's attached to the
these
that
lights.
community technical energy audit report, there's also a full,
Come up here and talk.
I was just going to say there's a full lighting audit that's attached to that as the appendix.
Okay.
And it details the exact replacement, what's there, what we're proposing to replace it with. So
Gotcha.
it's highly variable on what location we're looking at.
So do other cities then, if they change to an induction type of street lighting, do they then require future development to come in with induction lighting?
Typically they do. Typically that becomes the city's new standard, and they require that going forward, yes. Pretty simple to do too, actually. Did you guys find out the split yet?
So about 70%, 77 street lights.
Ready to move on, gentlemen, or more questions on this slide? You good?
Go ahead.
Okay. Peter or Trevor, I'm gonna have you guys come up and explain this. This is. I know what I know and I know what I don't know.
Councilman Hudson is making fun of my screensaver. So I remind him that I have 3 little girls that steal this city's iPad that I'm allowed to use.
Finding Nemo.
I was going to say Justin Bieber.
Tangled.
Oh, Justin Bieber. I just looked over and saw this cartoon character staring at me. My daughters would really like so.
That's good because Mark thought you were laughing at him.
Yeah, well, that's why I wanted to make sure. You're doing
Sorry,
great.
Mark, it wasn't you.
Okay, so this slide details some of the measures we're looking at in the pool area or the community center, obviously. The first here is the liquid pool cover. Currently, there's no cover at all in place. Typically, it's best to have a cover rolled out in the evening when the pool goes unoccupied and then rolled back in the morning or during the day whenever it opens. That cuts down on evaporation and cuts down on heating loss. So because there's nothing used in place right now, we're proposing a liquid pool cover, and we're proposing that as opposed to a hard cover because in general, they're typically too hard to be deployed. I mean, it can take, especially with a complicated pool, shape and size, it can take a couple of staff members maybe an hour to roll it out at night and an hour in the morning. So the liquid pool cover is a monomolecular compound that's automatically added to the pool on a continuous basis. It has its own small pumping system, and all that requires from staff as far as regular maintenance is just making sure that reservoir of this product, this liquid compound is kept full. In addition to that, we're also suggesting raising the pool area humidity set point. The humidity set point drives evaporation. When you have more evaporation, you have to replace that water. When you replace that water, you have to heat that water. So the pool area during our audit and through our data collection period was being kept extremely low, and it's actually set at a set point in the control system at 40%. Typically, in commercial, recreational, community centers like yours, that number is closer to like 50 to 60%. So that small difference in relative humidity makes a large difference in the amount of evaporation. So,
What about maintenance-wise with molds and that type of stuff outside of that? Doesn't that contribute to that?
So a higher, a higher relative humidity set point can lead to further condensation buildup on the interior walls.
Correct.
During our study, we actually did a 2-week period where we worked with Mark Henny, the facilities director. We did a test period, and this was at a time, if you were going to have a condensation problem, it would have occurred because you have the lowest outside air temperatures that you see throughout the year. So there were no problems reported during that period, and we went up to from 40 to 50%. So you could almost even argue to go to 60% and squeeze a little more savings out of there, but just to kind of be safe, and because we knew about those condensation concerns from staff, we're basing these savings that you see here on that kind of safer 50% level.
One other thing I'll mention too, the value of the liquid pool cover over a mechanical pool cover is, first cost is significantly less, far less. So those numbers would be way different if you were looking at mechanical pool covers.
What are the chemicals that's added that creates that liquid cover? I just think about, I don't want to be swimming in nothing but chemicals.
Crisco.
In a pool.
So the way this product works is it's a small amount is added to the pool on a daily basis based on the surface area of the pool. It's a monomolecular compound. It's been in use in commercial pools since the early 90s. This actually was used at the Atlanta 1996 Olympic Games. They used it in their pools. It's been in use very widely. It has no adverse effects on pool equipment. It has no adverse effects on any of your systems.
What about the people?
Including people.
They just lose their hair.
Yeah. No hair loss. But so this system, when it's undisturbed, so when people get out of the pool and it's left undisturbed for a short time, it rises to the top. It's actually lighter than water. And so it forms a thin layer across the top of the pool. It's invisible. You wouldn't even know you're looking at it if you were. And that thin layer is what creates that sort of thermal blanket, and it's basically your pool cover. It stops evaporation, it stops heat loss. And so when someone jumps in, it gets all stirred up, it gets mixed up in the pool. You would never know, and you're not getting any savings at that point from the product.
So when the pool cleaning's going on during the nighttime, does that not stir that up and stop the thing from forming, the liquid pool cover?
It shouldn't, because that pool cleaning is coming from, it pumps from the bottom of the pool itself, so that top layer should remain
It's
relatively
not like skimmer
stirred.
stuff on top that's...
Mhm.
I'd like to actually hear what our aquatics director, Ben Ray, has to say about it. I mean, I know we're going to be looking at a few different things and deciding what we want to implement, if anything, and I'd like to get his opinion on this, if you don't mind.
You could probably speak to Atlanta too, didn't you?
Yeah, I was there.
There you
Been
were,
in
yes.
that pool many times.
That
actually
grease
think
makes them
it's-
go faster, is that true? Or was it the suits?
Well, I think a little bit of buoyancy wouldn't hurt here with this, but I like the concept. I think it's something that would be worth us giving a try too, especially given that you lose, roughly 70% of your heat through your evaporation loss. So I think that's going to be your largest area where you'd be able to save. And they're right about pulling pool covers. It would take us hours of time to do that, and you couldn't efficiently do it on the leisure pool, even if you tried. So I think it would be well worth it. My one question is the amount of maintenance that it might take to keep the pump running, if there would be any associated. I'm not familiar with that delivery system. But other than that, I've done a little bit of reading, and I think it sounds like a really good idea for our facilities.
Would a hard cover make sense on the lap pool?
Well,
I mean, at night? That wouldn't seem like it'd be a lot of maintenance to retract. I mean,
It-
do other
it's-
pools do
It's
that?
a lot, yeah, a lot
That's
of
still a lot
pools
of
do
work.
that, but it takes a lot of manpower to get it on well. And then you're gonna have reels to put all of the covers on when they're not in use. Then where do you put that on the pool deck?
So most pools don't do that. Most lap pools don't have covers.
I mean, it's spread. I mean, when I was in Atlanta, we used different covers, but I mean, it could take us 20 minutes even with 50 swimmers to pull all the covers for one of our larger pools, so.
My experiences with those covers too is the chlorine have a tendency to break them down fairly quickly. So your replacement costs, depending on, the quality of cover you put on it, of course, the expense goes up and down with that, but your chemicals have a tendency to react and break them down fairly quickly, so you replace them once. I know we had a community I lived in, we replaced them once a year, and they were, like I said, they weren't all that big and heavy, about 3 people could pull it. Of course, it was a much smaller pool than this, but we were buying new pool covers every year because they just come apart. The chlorine's just breaking down.
One added aspect he just reminded me of was, I don't know if you guys are familiar, but Lehigh up near Salt Lake, very similar facility.
They copied us.
Yeah, they purchase hard covers. They don't use them just because they don't have the time. They don't have the people to devote to rolling them out and rolling them back every day. So.
One other comment too on the liquid pool covers, as is the case with all the measures we've proposed. Whatever the maintenance costs are for chemicals or the pumping or whatever, we have included that in the costs. So this is not one-sided savings. We're also allocating the annual costs that would be required for all of those measures as well. So that's been included in all
So
the
that
measures.
annual cost right there is,
Pumping,
that includes, that's a one-time cost for
Yeah, that's the first
pumps.
cost.
So what's the annual cost?
The annual cost for the cover is.
Is it
I
just,
can show it to you later. It's on a further slide, but it's roughly, I want to say 6,000.
we're just talking the cost of chemicals and
Cost of
some
chemicals.
maintenance? How does that fit into these numbers you're showing on this slide?
Well, it would, so, I mean, if you were to take,
Because that
replace
payback,
that cost.
that payback
from-
is based on the one-time cost, isn't it?
Right, yeah, so you've got the ongoing cost of the 6,000, but you're also annually saving 11,400.
Right, so the number would be 17,495, and then you take the back to 6 out. and
Okay,
then-
so that
yes.
annual savings is reflecting the 6,000 that you
Right.
discussed. Okay. This liquid, the chemicals that are added, because our pools are two separate lagoons, if you will, does that mix back in the mixing room and then it just gets pumped out to the whatever lagoon it goes to and then rises to the top? Is that how it works?
Exactly, and
So
there would be
we-
2 systems, so there'd be one for each pool. One
Each
for the
pool would
lead,
have
one
their
for
own
the-
system.
one for the- Yeah, they're small pumps, I mean, they're fractional horsepower pumps. They need to deliver, it's something like a few ounces a day, so it's not a lot.
Does the water from both pools mix or are they separately mixed? It's all
Yeah.
separate, so okay, so we can monitor levels and whatnot without.
Any other questions on the pool covers, or we ready to move? Okay. Go ahead.
So this kind of arose from the continual maintenance with the ozone sanitation for the lap pool, for both pools, lap and leisure pool. This solution uses ultraviolet for the sanitation and then a chloride generator to maintain the state code for chlorine requirements. The savings here are mostly operational, and those are maintenance cost avoidance. There's also some chemical savings in the chlorine usage, so it's a little bit higher of a payback when you look at strictly that number, but this is kind of one of those systems that was brought to our attention as needing serious attention, and this is one of those things where it fits nicely into the project because some of the lower payback measures can help you fit this in, and it's something that should probably be done. Otherwise, those ongoing maintenance costs are just they're never gonna stop. I mean, that ozone system is problematic and requires regular maintenance.
So those
Regular
savings that you're reflecting are people savings, it's labor savings, is that what you're saying?
It's a combination. So those savings are, this is called out in that TEA report, but it's basically a cost of ownership difference.
Can I get a copy of the 100-page report?
No.
Let's see.
Again, the only reason we didn't hand them out is because as we make modifications, and we'll give you the final.
We've been going through 100-page documents last month, and I'm not encouraging you.
You're out of reading materials, what you're
Yeah.
saying.
We also have it on CD, so.
I haven't had enough fires yet to get into those.
It makes for great reading when you can't fall asleep one night. But that savings is generated from the cost of ownership from your current ozone system to the cost of ownership for this new ultraviolet sanitation along with the chlorine generator together. So
Banner, Barry, I know that a couple years ago, there was a push up in the Salt Lake, because of the Salt Lake, I believe Salt Lake County Health Department, to move to a different, because of the issue they had up there with, did they end up pushing them into the ultraviolet?
There's only one facility in the state that maintains ozone still. Everybody in Salt Lake County and up north has gone to UV, and they all got the push in 2009 when there was large cryptosporidium outbreaks.
I couldn't remember that term for some reason.
You know, they had 3 times.
Cryptosporidium.
They had several times the normal level readings back in 2009, and part of that, in conjunction with the health department, they made a move in the direction towards UV. And the way the health department views it, if you, as a commercial pool, you have to have a secondary means of sanitation besides chlorine or whatever your primary means is. And so that's where you get the ozone and the UV in different systems. And when you get cryptosporidium, which is the most hard to kill, even in chlorinated pools, it may take as many as 10 days to kill. And that's just reality, even in well-maintained pools. These secondary systems, such as ozone and UV, kill it on contact, essentially disable it. So that's why it's required. If you do not have a UV system under the current code, if there were to be a cryptosporidium outbreak in southern Utah, they could come in as a health department and say, hey, you've got to superchlorinate your pool a minimum of 2 times a week for the expiration, for the extent of that warning period.
Remind me what cryptosporidium is to me. Isn't there a
Giardia.
Giardia, that's right.
So it's kind of similar to Giardia. But essentially, that's why all of the pools up north went to it. They had a huge outbreak in 2009, and essentially they all just went and got that system. Just as a kind of side note, the Sand Hollow pool is in the process of going in that direction as well. They're
Do we
installing
have a
the system.
secondary system then?
That is our ozone system.
So we do have an ozone system?
So actually swimming through a pool cover chemical may be the least of your concerns, considering you're swimming through Giardia potentially.
Well, hopefully
So-
not.
Maybe the pool cover will kill it, those chemicals.
But our system just isn't, we have a system, we want to replace the system then? Is that what we're talking about?
Well, I think that's kind of what the argument is we spend several $1,000s a year just on upkeep of our ozone system to replace all the parts. Mark can go and tell you the amount of time and yeah.
Yeah, basically the ozone system, when it was put in, it was probably pretty much on the way out. For some reason it went in. The maintenance on it is just outrageous, the man hours on it, the rebuilding of all the little parts and components in there. The cost of the components is very costly because we have to go through one manufacturer to get the parts. We can't select a different vendor to get the best cost to get it working. And over the years, it's just getting older and older. We've got ozone generators that the units alone are now basically falling apart, and to get them replaced, we can't just get the parts to replace them. We have to buy the whole system. One system's like $2,000 right off the bat just for that, and we've got like 12 of them running right now. Some of the technical part of the ozonator, the chambers they call them that produce the ozone, just to rebuild one chamber is like $500 in parts and we're running about 18 of those right now, and not including all the little relays, and it's like it was made in the 70s, you know, when they made the Apollo shuttle, you know, type of thing. So it works good when it's working, but it's keeping it working that's been a problem, and that's where we're at on that. We're constantly struggling to keep a budget for it and keep it running.
I'm just looking at our budget, 2013, and also our proposed 2014. Looks like you're about 11,500 for equipment in the pool area. What about chemicals? By going to this, is our chemical costs going to go down as well, I would assume?
It would be minimal on the savings for that, it's a secondary source. So we could save some stuff on superchlorinating, like going to that system, but you wouldn't see the full savings.
So this would be the primary system now, is that what we're saying, that this ozone, ultraviolet?
No matter what system you have to have chlorine. By law, you have to have so much chlorine in your water. Whether no chlorine in there at all, and your water's still clean and pure, and with these systems, a lot of times you wouldn't even need chlorine, but by law, you have to have so much chlorine. So no matter what, chlorine's in there. This does save, you know, the better your water is before the chlorine, the less you have to use.
Let me ask this, if a lot of the cost with the existing system is labor, and I assume we're talking a lot of it is the Washington City employee labor and keeping it going and maintaining.
Labor and parts.
Okay, on the labor, aren't those costs fixed? So I don't know how we save money unless we have to reduce labor force.
These numbers don't include labor?
In no cases are annual savings comprised of labor savings.
Okay.
They're all material or warranty type material savings.
Which if you go to the budget that Councilman Turk was referring to, that would not be a labor
The
budget.
cost for the ozonator with all the parts, the little, little pins, everything that breaks on those, he has to go back and rebuild, and it's just, I've seen the bills for those things there. It's crazy what they charge, and
Yeah, they're showing us an annual savings of 11.5, which is ultimately what we're budgeting for equipment.
for equipment,
So basically, we're saying that there's no more
Parts.
maintenance.
How long's
Hard
our
to believe.
ozone system been in there? 6 years, whenever it opened? And it's already falling apart?
they told us it's about a $10,000 a year to maintain with all the motors and pumps, and we knew that. We knew that system was costly.
I guess my concern is we got a 17.6 year payback, and if in 7-8 years, all of a sudden this ultraviolet system really is not the way to go, then we're still paying another 10 years on a system that's not usable anymore. I just wonder with changing technology, if we're gonna be upside down.
I don't know. Can't answer that. I just know that's
But you're
certainly
still going to have
ultraviolet are the
you're
best.
still going to have pumps and stuff that are involved with this one. There are no pumps?
Our ultraviolet is right in the line. It's an inline. It's an inline system. It's done with you can explain it.
Well, something's got to move the water somehow. You got to.
Yeah, it's already
That's the
moving.
councilman's comment, but the issue, Pete Turner. The issue with the ozone system isn't necessarily the technology's bad, it's been the equipment that produces the ozone and puts it in contact with the water that leads to fairly high continual maintenance costs. And in this case, we were at the facility today and half of the ozone machinery is torn apart as they're rebuilding it. So the question is it even now capable of providing the real, secondary protection you're looking for? Back to the technology question, the ozone systems, or the UV systems, it's basically lamps you're putting in a chamber to shine that wavelength of light on the water as it passes through the chamber. Because it's relatively maintenance-free on the chamber itself, it's just water passing through a tube. The only maintenance cost is replacing those lamps in there, and that's accounted for in the annual savings. We've just basically subtracted that annual cost out. So it really isn't a technology issue, it's how that technology, it ends up costing the facility maintenance hours and continual cost.
That's right, that it's a longer payback than we would have probably hoped to have had, of course. This is one, I think, am I clear, that we kind of went to them and said, this is a piece we want you to look at because of the challenges we have, and so we kind of handed it to them and asked them to analyze.
What is the useful life then on an ultraviolet sanitation program?
So when we look at the overall estimated life of a product, it's usually a sum of lots of components. So in this case, there are lamp components that you're gonna replace depending on your technology. There's a couple technologies in the UV you can choose from. They can be anywhere from replaced a couple times a year to once a year. I think we're looking at, so basically about a year is what the technology we're looking at. So those costs for replacing lamps, you know, that's in the cost, so you don't have to think about that in terms of a term. But the rest of the gear is basically a metal chamber and pipe, so it's probably 15, 20 plus years longer than the term itself.
Oh, longer than the payback?
No, well, yes, I would bet it's longer than the payback.
15 or 20 years longer than the payback, or just longer than the payback?
You know, it's a piece of pipe, so you know, you've got pipe in there that's gonna be 20 or 40 years old. Manufacturer will probably tell you 20 plus years.
So it sounds like it might be kind of a push, but a lot less headache for the staff. Is
The
that,
reality is the lifespan of that core piece of equipment is gonna be a very long time.
So where does that cost, that 203,000, what does that buy?
It buys two different types of systems for each pool. It buys a UV chamber for each pool, and it also buys the chlorine generator system for each pool, which creates the base load of chlorine that the pool uses. It also maintains the existing chlorine injection system that can be used to respond to specific events or whatever is needed to maintain the minimum state concentrations of chlorine.
So ultimately, we get rid of the liquid chlorine that we're now injecting.
We would maintain that system there. The way the chloride generator works is it's going to generate a consistent base level amount of chlorine. As your meters go in, the load picks up, that chlorine gets consumed. If that chloride generator can't maintain the code required amount, that chlorine injection system is still there. Our savings reflect that you would probably still use maybe even half of what we currently now inject from the liquid, or we're using solid liquid. Solid. So we would assume that you would use at least half of what you're putting in now, even though you're likely to use a lot less for a conservative one. So you would maintain all of the current systems or capability you have for chlorine now. You just add the ability of the chloride generator to keep that base load in the pool.
What would be the benefits of adding that if our current system is adequate to maintain chlorine levels? Why would we need to buy
Well, we need to
chlorine generation?
Oh,
We wanted to pair something with the UV system that would save you actual dollars per year. We know what you spend yearly on your chlorine spend. And by using the chloride generator to provide that base load of chlorine, you no longer have to buy it each year. So that savings then becomes dollars to help this overall project.
What's the
I
life
think
on?
I think that point is kind of worth clarification. So every dollar that you see in this report that you're saving, you're spending today. So every one of these dollars are being spent today. So really kind of what it boils down to is the choice is you can continue to go along with the way you're doing it and continue to spend additional money in materials and energy and so on and so on, or you can shift those dollars to get new equipment and a project that pays for itself beyond the term of the project. Shoot. So that's really, I think that's really kind of the key point to keep in your minds is you're spending every one of these dollars already right now in your budget.
Well, I guess that's the thing, when I ask about chemicals, they said, well, we're gonna stay about where we're at. Then I hear we're gonna use about half of what we're,
Well, I think his comment was directed towards the UV system. When you have a UV system working with the chlorine one, it's a safe argument to say that you shouldn't use any less chlorine, although you probably would, because you can destroy some of the biological, components in your water. The chloride generator is the component of this measure that actually saves you the dollars, because that replaces the solid chlorine that you have in the pool. So he was addressing the UV technology.
What I was saying is you have to have so much chlorine in the pool no matter what.
correct, no, I understand that.
Yeah, so.
But I guess
that
I'm looking at
sanitation-
budgeted dollars and saying, okay, we're gonna spend, we budgeted $30,000. I'm assuming most of that's chlorine, for the most part, and, I mean, we're calling it chemicals, but, so, I would anticipate that if we're putting chlorine generators in there, we should see that fall to around
Yes.
$15,000
It would drop.
on a budgeted level.
Because we wouldn't have to add, that chlorine would already be present. Whatever amounts we have to go up to make, to meet that state requirement, certainly we have to be there, but this generator supplies that chlorine, and then we just add whatever we need to get there, so.
Okay, any other questions on this equipment?
What's the life of the chlorine generator? Obviously, that's something that's producing the chlorine different than the UV lights, which is just something the water passes by. And
It's very similar to the UV system. You have a core, call it a box that uses the electrolysis. You essentially add salt to the water to increase the salt concentration. Using the process of electrolysis and a small side stream of water, you essentially create chlorine. So the replacement parts are the small plates on there, just like you could equate those to the lamps in the heating system. Replacement cost for those is assumed in the savings for the system, and the rest of it is not.
Because I know I actually have that system on my pool, and I know those little things that passes through, they get build up with stuff on, you have to take them apart, either replace them or clean them, and then you got salt in, you got the cost of salt for your pool and monitoring that volume. And
Yep, and they drain the pool out every year, so that cost of resalting the system has to be accounted
Yeah, I have a similar system, but it's been interesting because certainly my chlorine generator did not last 17.6 years, I can promise you that. It would have been nice if it would have. But on the flip side, since it did go out and I haven't replaced it, I know for a fact, having chlorinated my pool using chlorine, it's a whole lot more expensive to use chlorine than even replace the salt generator. It's always the upfront cost. But I'm a little bit pushed a little bit on the fact that I'm having a hard time believing you're going to go a full 17, 18 years without on the chlorinators, because like I said,
Some
I maybe get
replacement.
3 or
Yeah,
4 or 5 out of a residential one.
Well, I was gonna ask Mike,
Quite a residential the same as a commercial grade, but again, you can replace the components that are failure rate or what we consider the consumer
And
parts.
is there any concern, I mean, I've talked to, people have actually persuaded me not to use my chlorine generator anymore because of the corrosion problems with any metallic parts, including the heating system. They say it's very tough on that and increases the deterioration of the components.
It definitely depends on the strategy you use for your system. There's a couple of competing strategies for what your salt concentration is. They up to about 4,000 parts per million to 8,000. We recommend the lower. You have to obviously put in your cathodic protection and maintain that. But you have the same, call it corrosion issues with the primary sanitation chemical you use, which is chlorine. So that's not an issue that the pools don't already experience. So as long as that's maintained properly, commercial environment, that is not doing corrosion.
Have you had any problems with that in your residential one?
Yeah, in fact, they told me to switch from it because it's, a lot
Is
of
it-
heaters are failing as a result of the salt.
Oh,
going
interesting,
through the
because
units.
we've had ours about 9 years and I've not had any corrosion problems. That's why I was asking, because I haven't had any corrosion problems. And I should say it was run probably 8 years.
You have to maintain a sacrificial anode in your system, otherwise your material components of your heating system become the anode that deteriorates due to corrosion, so that has to be maintained. Just like you have the same component inside a water heater or your other hydronic systems. So it just has to be maintained.
Mike, we had a system out to the treatment facility, a generator. Seems like we got rid of that for, tell me what your experience, because that would certainly be a commercial grade system.
Yeah, we did. We ran it for about 10 years, and we've actually changed back over to chlorine gas. Because the cost of running the power that it used to generate it, and it was past its useful life, and we had to replace the whole unit, and it was just more cost-effective to go with the 150-pound cylinders of chlorine gas, which we store at the treatment plant anyway, because we use them at all of our other facilities. So
I remember us changing out, like, I couldn't remember why we had made that change, so.
There
That was
was a
about
lot
10,
more-
you got about 10 years out
I
of
got
it?
about 10 years out of it, but the generator itself was actually undersized, wrong sized for the power coming in. We actually had to have a separate transformer that reduced it down, and there's a few other issues with it. But
Ready to move to the next slide? Trevor?
This is a pretty good workout on these slides though, isn't it?
That's great. Those are great questions.
Okay, so this is advanced controls along with recommissioning, and these are grouped together. They can be thought of as separate fins, but they really impact each other, and that's why they're lumped together here. So this is at the advanced controls for the community center and city hall. That's a new control system. There's currently Johnson controls system here, and then there's a carrier comfort network at the community center. So this would tie that together using the components that can be, but it would have one single front end. And then the recommissioning is things like, you know, adjusting set points, making sure sensors are reading correctly, time of day scheduling. It's basically, commissioning is done when a building is turned over to the owner from the construction. So over time, what happens is the last person out of the building is generally the controls electrical contractor. They'll check out all the equipment, make sure it's showing up correctly in the controls front end. What happens over time is some of those systems get adjusted, set points get moved, set points get changed, scheduling of equipment changes. So what we would do is go through and recommission that system. So all of those systems, so air handlers, boilers, chillers, pumping, things like that. So we would make sure that the building operation matches occupancy schedules, and all that saves energy, because currently you've got a lot of equipment that's running continuously in both locations. So that's what the recommissioning piece is. The air handler reset is specifically matching the ventilation, air, and heating schedules to match the occupancy loads. There's also a temperature reset along with that. It's currently delivering on a 24-hour a day basis 72-degree air in most cases. So this would, during unoccupied times, reduce that in the heating season and increase that during the cooling season when the building is unoccupied. And then, yeah.
Is that something that we could do now with our existing equipment?
With your current control systems?
Of adjusting that, I mean, if we're doing it continuously now, and you're saying we're just going to reset that to where it comes on as you need it, is that something that we could do? I mean, probably something we should do anyway?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, it can be done with the current control system. It's just that you've got two different systems in two different buildings, so it makes it hard to keep track of everything that's going on. You don't get alarming currently if something is out of whack, or if a building, or if an air handler trips on high static pressure. There's all sorts of issues with that, but yes.
Well, we had a long discussion on this particular issue when we were initially reviewing this, and I was particularly focusing upon the community, city hall here, because that's been it's been problematic for us from day one. And we really had a discussion with regards to, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we are looking at some controls change-outs. So, for instance, you've got some pretty old thermostats and other things that are here, and then the commissioning portion is to make sure that all of those components, both, correct me if I'm wrong again, the new components added along with any of the existing components that are maintained are all working properly. They're commissioned properly. Is that a layman's version of it? I mean,
that's correct. It'd be using, for instance, an example might be the supply air temperature sensor in your registers here. So that's feeding back a signal to your control system. It's telling you what degree air is coming out, right? So we would reuse that sensor. We'd make sure it's reading properly and that it's okay. It's still there, number one, and that it's reading the correct temperature, number two. But we can reuse some of those components like a temp sensor.
So my question was, I don't want a neat-looking thermostat running a piece of garbage equipment. And, I think the word that I heard back is we think that the predominant problems with City Hall, and maybe so with the community center, is just these control mechanisms and then the commissioning of those control mechanisms to make it do what it's supposed to do. Johnson controls are still controls, I'm sure you know, that are still around today. And so that was their argument to me, is that, you don't necessarily have to be hauling out big pieces of equipment and putting big pieces of equipment in. That this is going to not only show some savings, but increase make some improvements upon the system we've got. The cooling tower actually is not that old. I think you'll remember when we changed that cooling tower out 4 or 5 years ago. Mark, you were here.
This also helps give staff direct oversight, makes it easier for them to control systems. If something goes out of whack, they can get an alarm basically on a cell phone or an email and log into the system remotely, change it, and address that need immediately rather than coming in the next morning and realizing that, oh, this thing's been, we're in the middle of summer and for some reason it's heating right now, things like that. So those things can be addressed right away.
You're gonna slow Mark down to where he gets lunch from now on. Now, what are you doing
What's
that
that?
for? You're gonna slow down to where Mark starts getting lunch.
Well, I'll tell you a funny thing. You mentioned that too. I'd say the annual savings cost could very easily come from stopping to use space heaters in this building, when exactly what happens is you talk about the heating system will kick itself out on a Friday afternoon, Friday evening, about the same time your child gets sick and needs to go to a doctor. The heating system will kick itself out. We don't know it till Monday morning. It's taking a day to recover. And in the meantime, people are working, so they're plugging in their space heaters to make it work.
My experience is every office needs space heaters anyway, because there's women and men there.
And you're correct there.
It never works. Never works.
The key concept there, Councilman Siegmiller, is they would be required less often.
I have a fan blowing on me while my secretary has a heater blowing on her at the same time of day. And I'm just amazed.
We wanted to break the controls out separately because this is an important point, and this was included in the previous slide. While this looks like a really long payback, if you look at the notes below, we are required by state statute to do measurement and verification throughout the term of the project. That comes with a cost that is built into the cash flow information. So by not doing those controls, the impact financially to the city would be between $6,000 and $9,000 annually throughout the term of the project. So essentially, these savings literally offset the cost of those controls, not to mention the other values that we've pointed out, value in terms of how staff can control it, comfort in the buildings, both systems are talking to each other, so it's important to point that out to you folks. Any questions on that? Okay.
This is converting constant volume pumps to variable volume pumps. This is at the community center. So currently there's on the pool heating loop and as well as the space heating loop for that building. Those heating loops are run constant volume, which means the pump is providing the same amount of heated water constantly to the system, whether or not heating is actually needed. If it's not needed, it's simply bypassed around the equipment and returned back to the boiler and sent back out again. So what we're proposing is to install VFDs, variable frequency drives, on those pump motors. Those can receive a signal that control the motor speed. So then it would only pump the amount of heating water needed at that moment for whatever system, whether it's the pool or for space heating. And so just by doing that, you can generate some savings, and that's just all from pump motor reduced electrical load. One thing to keep in mind is this is already in need based on the way the building's being run right now. Given some of the other measures that we've proposed already, for instance, the pool cover, the relative humidity set point, the setbacks for the air handlers, this measure is going to be needed even more. You're going to be able to turn those pumps down even further. So that's basically it.
Questions on that one? We're closing in, gentlemen, we're closing in. So weatherization, this is very self-explanatory. We actually had a weatherization contractor that looked at each of the facilities and came back with recommendations on how we could seal cracks and leaks and seals and so on, so that you reduce infiltration of warm air in the summer and of course, having the cool air escaping. So everybody's done that in their homes to some degree. That's really what that boils down to.
I tell you, if we keep that front north community center closed, that'd help.
Okay, and this is a really simple item. This is essentially a plug-in item that turns the lights off on vending machines certain times of the day. So rather than having the lights burn all through the night in a vending machine, they go off at certain hours, and there's savings there. So this is a reiteration of the slide you saw first. And here's the cash flow, and I apologize for the small size of this, but it's what we've got to do to get it all to fit. So actually, I'm going to let you talk about this, Trevor, since you set it up. Just kind of talk about the way you arranged it is really what I'm after.
Sure. So this is basically set up to give you an idea of your annual net cash flow and then your cumulative net cash flow. I'll kind of just quickly go across the headings here. So obviously energy savings is going to come from utility savings. Operational is things like maintenance. The gross savings are the total of that. Your principal and interest are your payments. Again, that's assuming that 2.8%. M&V costs are what Mark already is what Mark alluded to originally. That's the cost for us. With the way the project is oriented right now and has been presented thus far, that's the cost for us to basically produce a report. We come back out, we make measurements, we utilize the new control system, and we take key measurements that indicate whether or not savings are being generated and realized. So that's an annual report that you guys will receive on the anniversary of the project every year. For the term. So the program costs would be the sum of the principal and interest plus M&V, and then the difference between the savings and then the program cost is your net cash flow. So I called out on here the 15-year dollar amount, even though this project really pays back in about 12 and a half years, and that's because of the LOI requirement, the letter of intent. And this will make a little bit more sense why I chose 15. It's because we're going to break out the solar here in a minute. And I kind of wanted to give you an apples to apples kind of comparison. So if there's no questions, we should probably move on, unless there's...
I do need to make a comment, though. This is an estimated cash flow. Once the final scope is determined and we know the final project cost and we know the entire scope, then the lending institution by state statute has to show a cash flow that is cash flow positive every year. So you wouldn't see any negative cash flow years. It would be evened out so that every single year was net positive cash flow. So please keep in mind, this is not the cash flow. This is a representative cash flow. The numbers are correct, the interest rate's correct, all those kinds of things are correct, but the years would not line up the way you see them here. Okay? That makes sense? Okay, so here's the rooftop solar heating, and actually I wish we would have, I'm going to skip down a couple of slides and I'm going to come back, and here's why. So this is the national average for natural gas prices. You can see that over the last 12 or so years. You can see it trended up significantly, and now it's trending down. The same thing would apply to Utah. These prices are higher because they're national average, but the same trend would apply to Utah. So what we showed here in this graph is what happens to the payback on the solar thermal in terms of the sensitivity of the natural gas pricing. So you can see with relatively minor moves in natural gas prices, that payback improves significantly. So I'm going to go back to the slide now. So the payback that you see on that slide currently is based on current natural gas rates, but the payback could change significantly. So Trevor, go ahead.
Those rates are already, I don't know, I was going to bring this up earlier, but those rates, Questar's already requesting higher rates as of right now, 7% increase.
Right.
And so I know that our natural gas rates are already gonna go up.
Yeah. I think all indicators are pointing that direction. It's a little bit crystal ballish, but
Right.
every indicator out there, and I've got some sources kind of back that up that I can cite if you guys want even more information about that. But go ahead.
I hope it goes up.
You must own some stock, huh?
Wait forever for this.
Yeah, but we just approved.
You
our
also,
backup
yeah.
generators on natural
You also have
gas, too.
stock in natural gas generators.
And wait forever for this.
I feel like a commodities broker.
Well, I probably will still point out, at least from our observation from the power side of things, is even though we're seeing, and again, it's anybody's guess on the long term, but even though we might see some pushes up a little bit, they're still historically low, and both because of supply. Matter of fact, one of the things that's pushed it up a little bit over the last few years is lack of storage, because they've had all the storage facilities, they pack that into salt mines and other things, and it's all. And then, of course, the fracking, but I think you're gonna see a push up just because you're gonna see additional regulations come down the pipe on that issue, and that in and of itself is gonna scare the market a little bit up. But still, I mean, we've got great gas prices, even with these changes that are proposed, it's just, we've got great gas prices right now, and for some time, I think.
So to put this in perspective now, this is the project if you include the solar thermal, so you can see essentially, based on current natural gas prices, you get an item that would typically have a 32-year payback. Now, by the other items contributing to that, you have an overall project that pays back in essentially 16 years. So that's really the power of this type of an approach, is that the shorter term payback items help pay back the longer term.
But wouldn't it make sense to hang on to our natural gas heating while the rates are down, and then if we do see natural gas costs go up, then look at solar thermal technology, maybe even when that technology is, more efficient and less costly?
Yeah, the only comment I'd make to that is there are some economies of scale by doing it as you're doing an entire project and you have contractors on site, but you're absolutely right. And we're not advocating one way or the other. We're just providing you this information so you can take a look at it and say, is it valuable enough for us to do this or not do this? And so that's why we've actually shown a separate cash flow. And you go ahead, Trevor.
But the difference is, just let me see if I've got this right, because you've shown that project financial highlights before. With the addition of the rooftop thermal, you're looking at a difference of 13-year payback versus 16-year payback. I just wanted to see if I had that right.
That's right. That's exactly right.
I think that's a good point, though, Councilman. I think that, that's why I think it was good that we had them kind of peel this one out separately a little bit.
Yeah, because just my knee jerk is, let's go solar thermal, let's try and do it as much as you can, but that's a big ticket item with a long payback, assuming natural gas prices stay low. If they increase, then you could maybe be a little more reactionary on something like that.
And if all of us knew what was going to happen with those prices,
Oh, man.
it'd be great, wouldn't it? So really, I guess the overarching question, if I were in your chair, would be, what do I think, or what do we think as a governing body is going to happen with natural gas prices? Are they going to go up? Are they going to go down? Or are they going to stay flat? If the assumption is they're going to go down, then this only gets better. If they go up, it gets better. Apologize. If they, I don't have a crystal ball either, but I think they're pretty low, and so I think there's a higher probability that they will go up than go down. If they go up, these numbers just get better. That's really the question.
If I can add one quick thing too, the data on this slide here came from the EIA.gov website, Energy Information Agency. They also do their best to project the price of natural gas, and they do a lot of studies. You can go do this research on your own if you go to their website, just EIA.gov.
Are they better than the population estimators?
I was gonna say about the same.
Well, they're projecting a 2.4% annual increase every year between now and 2040. And that's due to a lot of the reasons that Roger brought up with supply and demand. The price of oil, I think, is we all know, only going to go up, and that's a heavy driver on natural gas usage. There's also extraction costs. We're starting to get to the point in the United States where it's getting more and more expensive because we've depleted all the easy sources for natural gas. And so there's going to have to be technology changes. There's going to have to be investments from natural gas extraction companies. EIA.gov also just recently listed that the price of natural gas currently is less than the extraction costs. So I think we all can do the math on that one and decide that that's not going to stay that way. I mean, those companies have to be sustainable. So it's going to go up. It's just a matter of how much. This graph right here shows that price increase at the 2.4%. So that price in 5 years, you guys are currently paying $5.90 a decatherm. That would go up to $6.93. In 10 years, it'd be $8.47, and in 15, it's $10.36. So at $10.36 on that bottom axis, you can see that drops your simple payback to in the upper teens as far as the payback. So just something to kind of drive the discussion on what this can actually do and how it can actually affect your project
Those are
here.
the reports we always use to lock in our gas prices, and then they go the opposite direction.
Yeah, the thing, I thought I just saw something where they found a whole new area of deposits that's easy to get to. So to me, it comes down to government regulation. If we allow the drilling to take place, we're gonna have probably a reduction in price. Depends on who's in office to allow that to happen. So I'm not banking on some great escalation of prices to make the solar system.
One other quick comment is on this slide here. If you take this further back, before 2000, all the way back to the early 80s, that price is almost a flat line at about $5 a decatherm. And again, heavy oil driven. What happened in the late 90s? Oil price went up. I think that's going to be the main driver on the price of gas, natural gas. And so you can see the volatility that adds to the price here. I mean, it goes from $5 steady flat line for 2 decades to up to 2.5 times that in a few years, and then back down. It's expected to go back up by all. Take it or leave it, those predictions, but
Well, it also depends on when you think Armageddon will happen. Being silly. So it also depends on when you think Armageddon's gonna happen.
Yeah. Good
well,
point.
we got past
Next week,
The Mayans missed it, so.
Yeah, we made it past that day.
next week, the Parowan prophet will be here to talk to us.
So let me just kind of wrap up and make a couple of observations and suggestions. So you have, the information that you have before you would be essentially firm fixed pricing based on the current scope. So if you said, and I'm not suggesting I'm not trying to drive you honestly one way or the other. If you said, let's stick with the scope minus the solar thermal, and let's go with those items, that would be the number that you would be holding us to, that we would go to the financial community and say, we have a $1.66 million project, and it pays back in about 12 and a half years. What's the interest rate? We would begin that process as directed by you. I don't want to make any assumptions here. So the recommendation we would like to make is the next step would be you as a governing body determine of that scope what ought to be included in an ongoing project. Once you've made that decision, then we would finalize the report with that information as part of it. So it would go from a 90% review to 100% review. We think there's there are plenty of compelling reasons to consider that $1.66 million scope because of the interactive nature of those measures and because of the requests, frankly, of staff regarding the ongoing operations and maintenance costs. Again, clearly those decisions are yours. All we need to do, frankly, to move forward is know what is it you would like us to consider going forward so that we can finalize the documents for you so that you can ultimately decide. Thanks. You want me to stay up here? You want to, what do you want to go from here?
I guess I'm just talking off the top of my head, and I usually get in trouble for doing that, but I appreciate your work. I guess I'm frankly, unfortunately, just a little disappointed in that there's not significant savings in other areas. I know when we first considered the presentation, we talked about the low-hanging fruit being the lighting out there, and we all knew that that would be significant savings, and now when the report's done, it's 2/3 of our overall savings appears to be the lighting issue, and I thought that maybe we'd find something more significant in a shorter payback period than what we found. I don't know what you actually excluded from this that you found not feasible that we thought maybe we would be able to do at the community center. And
Well, let me respond to that this way. In the very beginning, the direction that we felt we were getting was, let's try to keep the project around 12 or 13 years if possible, and let's focus on those items that will get us there. So we did look at other items, but essentially what we've presented to you is what kind of meets the qualifications that we felt were given to us for the project.
yeah, and I was actually more of a 7 to 10 year payback time period advocate than the 10 to 13.
But that was discussed, that timetable.
Well, and I think sometimes you get looking at that, and that's why, to me, the shorter time frame is even better, because I look at the solar and say, what's the life expectancy of a solar panel? Yeah, I mean, so you put out this much, and yeah, you get your savings, and all of a sudden in 16 years, you're redoing the whole project again, and so.
And we agree with that, which is why we broke that out separately. Let me just answer your question. Measures reviewed, but were not recommended, and this is in the report. So there were some water conservation things looked at for domestic plumbing fixtures. We looked at a photovoltaic system. We looked at boiler replacement, boiler flue stack and economizers, chilled water reset, pump motor upgrades. So there were several items that were considered, but they would have all extended
The payback.
exactly.
Yeah.
Just to add to your last comment on the solar thermal, that system comes with a 15-year warranty. Now, I know if you can kind of think past that 15-year number, a warranty does not necessarily indicate useful life. So if it would help, I can dig up some studies and places that have done solar thermal and get a useful life.
No, that's
I think
why I mean, I've got some connections that I could talk, in fact, I anticipate talking to. That's why I don't think that I would care to make a decision here tonight. I would like to spend some time as a council discussing some of these things. I'd like to have Kelly come in with our power department, discuss our lighting issues and some of those things. Personally, I don't think that I would like to make a decision where we want to go tonight.
I didn't mean to suggest that. What I meant was, whenever that decision is made, we can't really finalize a report until.
Certainly, I see that.
That's what I meant.
I agree that you're looking for your next marching orders and saying, okay, where do you want us to take this thing?
Correct.
But I think that there's some heavy discussion this council needs to have.
Certainly, I think lighting's a big one. I'm not sure what kind of, and maybe you didn't, maybe this question wasn't even responded to or asked when you talked to the other cities on their payback. I couldn't imagine it's too much different than the 10, but that does put us at the 10, you know, but that's a big part of it. I mean, that's just almost half of what the total cost is. And we know from a UAMP standpoint that street lighting is still what I would probably say is a low-hanging fruit issue, but for sure.
Yeah, and I know, I remember discussion here saying, well, you know, if we just go ahead and take care of the lighting issue, would we need Siemens? Would we need to pay the $50,000 to do that? And if that's really 2/3 of our savings, I guess, frankly, I'm just a little disappointed that the savings are not bigger within a relatively short time payback.
It seems like in addition to the lighting, the other areas kind of fit. You got the pool area, the pool sanitation, and then the pumps at the pool. So 3 of those have to do with the pool, and then 2 of them have to do with the controls and the advanced controls, you know, with the heating and air units and whatever here at the community center, other than weatherization and venting, which seem to be quite small. So we almost came back to the same things we
Talked about.
thought we might easily find, but
I seem to recall that the boilers were gonna be one of the low-hanging fruit too, but my
That was-
memory's not perfect.
Now, the boilers is what, that one, it seemed like we had a lot of costs going out, that we thought we'd have to make those more efficient, because that's where our utility bills were so high or going up from, and but that one didn't work, so.
Barry, can I put you on the spot again, just to talk about, you know that building up there better than anybody, and I just want to know from your standpoint how critical these things that affect the pool are. And I would take your recommendation on that, at
On
least
the
personally.
pool or on the solar, on everything?
Well, not the, to me, I don't, my personal opinion is, while gas prices are low, it doesn't make sense to do solar, but I would
agree.
like to hear your thoughts on.
I think the first one to go out of that whole thing would be the solar.
So I would,
The only other thing on the pool that I don't know what the total cost savings, these guys could probably tell you more. I don't know how much we would save on the chlorine generation, what that cost exactly, and how much chlorine we could buy over those years, you know, with that. So to me, that wouldn't be as important as the UV. The UV, I think, is
and you can do
critical
those
to us.
separately? You don't have to have the generator to do the UV?
I don't think so. I think it's UV and the
Are they-
generation, they gotta be separate units.
Sure, so
Yeah.
to talk some general numbers, if the chlorine spend is about $20,000 a facility, our estimates are you'd reduce that in the 40 to 50% range of your actual direct injection of chlorine. So that then becomes the dollar amount that we can use every year to help pay
For the,
for the portion that it takes to get the chlorine generator in there, plus offset the higher cost on the UV system, which was really the target thing to do. The chloride generator, chloride-based generator was essentially an add-on to try to drive some more savings.
try to find the savings on the chlorine itself to be able to do the other upgrades?
So it just depends if you think that chlorine savings is enough, if that's, you know, it sounds like it's pretty
Yeah.
significant,
It'd
but
be interesting to look at the cost of that.
That's where the
just
real savings come. It seems like to pay for these upgrades, the savings in the chlorine to pay for the ultraviolet sanitation and the chloride generator, right?
Well, there's other savings. The ultraviolet's partially paid for by getting rid of the ozonators problems.
Oh, that's right. And that
Ozonators.
wasn't even
Yeah,
really
the
totally
It
accounted for in
replaces
this
the
slide.
ozonator.
yeah, the UV is, you know, the ozonator is probably our biggest problem and expense, you know. Again, the chlorinator generator, the chlorine generator, I think is just an added thing to try to, you know, pick up some more dollars that way, but
It sounds like it's just a technology that can help us buy less chlorine.
it's just, you know, that the ozonator that we have, the man time and the parts and the cost for all that kind of stuff is just, I see those bills and I just shake my head, I just, you know. But then again, I'm always on Mark. Mark can tell I'm always on Mark because that's a system we have to have. It helps us have better water, and so I want that thing up and going and running and doing what it's supposed to do, and it's just a huge cost. It drives us all crazy how much that costs. So. that-
Kids doing other things in the pool.
I mean, the ozonator, when that works right and everything's going good, that water's beautiful. It's great water. It works, you know, but it's the cost of
The
that.
maintenance of it and
The
the
maintenance and the
time.
cost is.
Does this ultraviolet thing give you the same quality of water?
Oh, yeah, it does. And that's what everyone's going. It actually cleans the water better. I mean,
Better.
it's actually a better sanitizer.
Just kind of
It's just, we're just in a, it's just, you know, and if we would've known this back at the time, we wouldn't have ever got the ozonator. I mean, it's an expensive machine, it's an expensive to upkeep. And it was about outdated. I don't know how many years, you know, probably a couple years before the other system came in, it's just, and that's where everyone's going to because it's so superior. Yeah. Well, that's
Then the other thing was the pumps, the variable pumping. But do you have any thoughts on that? I guess it's just kind of cut and dry.
Yeah, you know, I don't understand that as much. These guys are the ones who've gone through all those, you know.
Well,
what
certainly
the pumping
whenever,
is.
I think Mike would even agree, certainly whenever we have the opportunity to do variable
Yeah.
pumps, they make sense. I mean, otherwise you're just running energy to circulate.
It just brings the cost down, the energy cost down.
Other than the vending visor.
I
So
wonder
those
if
are
you
my
could put those
feelings.
same, you know, you see those timers that you plug into your thing, and you plug your lamp in, that, my first thought was, let's go buy some timers.
Shut them off.
That's all they are.
Yeah, exactly.
Let me just ask a question on the M&V cost. That's your measuring costs each year. It looks like it's about $130,000 just to come in and tell us whether we're being efficient or not over the 13 years. Is that what we're looking at?
Yeah, that's in a nutshell, correct. It is required, because
Required under the contract to
yeah,
make certain you're
because
meeting
it's
your
a performance
guarantees,
contract. Yeah.
and we have to pay for that to make certain you're meeting your guarantees.
Yeah, it's the state statute.
They say that, and that's your fees fixed by statute to do that, or just the monitoring's required by
So
state statute?
the way that that's set up is there's actually, it's intensive for the first couple of years, I believe 3, and then we drop, and you can see that in the price.
It goes down to 8 and then back up to 10.
Yeah, and so, and that's because after, in this scenario, year 3, we drop the heavy trending, and if you're meeting savings for 3 years, and that's been measured and verified, most customers agree to drop those costs, and they're okay with that.
Then how come they go back up in the last 3 years then?
They actually go up between years 1 and 3, and then years 4 and through the end, and that's just due to just an escalation. I think it's, is it 1%?
Yeah, they seem to increase at about the same increment.
Yeah, it's about 2%.
So the monitoring is required by statute, and I guess these are just, you do your fee based on a % of the total contract price, or how do you?
It's our cost to do the report. So in this case, it's a trip for one person for a couple days. We take some measurements. With the new control system, we can set up trending so that can be accessed remotely. So that helps as well, save some costs. And so that's the big difference there.
I can add to that a little bit. There's also some detailed commissioning and measurement verification checklists in the body of the report, and that actually spells out what we would be doing in those years.
Yeah. I guess I felt like Councilman Segmiller, it'd be nice to have that report, you know, where we're kind of being asked to decide what parts of the program we want to go forward with, and yet we don't have the details. So I think it'd be helpful if we could get that disc or something to look at.
I don't think that's a problem.
Just ask a question, just a logistical question. So we left 2 or 3 discs, gentlemen, do you remember?
Can it just be it's probably too big to upload it in Dropbox, right?
It's only
Yeah,
100-something pages.
It's 100 pages,
It
so.
should go in there.
Oh, I should go into
No
Dropbox.
problem.
Yeah, we can just add, if you can get it added to our Dropbox. that'd be
I honestly don't
Or even
remember who
could you
kept
put
the
it in Google
CDs, you remember?
Docs, just
Or
to
even
access
Google
it,
Docs,
just so we
either
can
way.
Just to access it as a doc.
Oh, you got one?
I think I gave Roger the CD, when I brought the book and the CD
Oh.
together, and I think Mark has one, so those are the ones we have.
Okay, so if you want to just,
It's just text documents. It
Yeah.
would be
Yeah, perfect,
So if we just put it as a Google Doc, we can just go access it.
perfect, either way.
Yeah, I think that would be important. I
Yeah, if
agree,
we can,
for us to look at
if we
those
can
things. and-
look at that, and then let's talk about it again in a couple weeks.
Yep.
sorry. I have to get out of here. What do they say about a cluttered desktop?
At least you don't have a
I
picture
usually say,
tangled on there.
welcome to my office.
You talking about the computer or the desk? Because both of mine are messy.
Yeah,
Any other questions?
You know, I just, and you may be going the same, I just wanted, I know we're kind of hard on some of those, but we really appreciate this, and I know that we'll all look through this very carefully, and I think there's a lot of, especially on the pool area, that I think make a lot of sense, and some of the other areas too, so I'm feeling probably pretty good about it, personally.
Just maybe one parting comment. It's pretty obvious. It's obvious why we broke out the solar thermal, but we felt like it was important to at least let you see what happens to the sensitivity based on natural gas. Doesn't mean you're going to decide to go that way, but we felt like it was valuable information.
Well, it's good for us to see it as well, because we have had a solar thermal company come and discuss converting our pool for us, so now we have a little bit of information on costs and paybacks and things, so.
Mark, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks,
for
Mark.
your time and efforts, all of you gentlemen, for your educational process for us and to us. Okay, we'll move on to item 4, discussion review of the possibility of renting and or leasing the community center on Sundays. Councilman Hudson.
A few weeks ago, it's probably been a couple months now, the council directed the community center committee to dig into this item and kind of come back with a recommendation from the committee. We've gone into it. We've discussed different options, different variables, ways that it might be possible to be able to rent out different areas of that facility. And as we looked at it, we came up with the conclusion as a committee that there wasn't a way that we could fairly treat everybody the same and rent the facility without it having an economic impact upon budgets and different things up there at the center. If we rent it to one, we felt like if it was rented to one group for even a small event that wouldn't necessarily have an impact on our budgets, it's impossible at that point to tell other people with different types of events that we can't do it for them. And so as a committee, that's kind of the direction that we've said, but we wanted to bring that back to you. I thought it would be good to discuss it tonight before we set I thought it would be important. It's on the agenda for tomorrow night, but I think it's something that the council needs to have a policy that we direct to our staff. So there you go. That's where we're at. If you have questions
Well,
or concerns.
I personally agree with your committee's findings. I just don't see how feasible, and we look at budgets and the discussions we're having right now and costs, and I just looked at it and said, how feasible is it for us to do it? And then, like you said, where do you draw the line that we can allow certain things, and then all of a sudden now we got a full staff pool? And
Yeah, you know, the event that was brought to us, we felt like was a very reasonable request. But at that point, it comes to, we have other groups that want to do things on Sundays, family reunions,
Correct.
quinceañeras, things like that, that become large impacts on that facility.
The term I often use is you get the camel's nose through the door.
Yeah.
Before long, the whole camel's coming.
So it's one of those where we can't, if we do it at all, then we have to do it for everybody. And we just,
In fact, in light of budget and having some discussions, something that I personally would like the committee to look at is possibly actually constricting some of the times that we're open up there and looking at reduction of times and staffing and in light especially of usage, where we can start to shut pumps down and temperatures down and see if we can't do some things there. So
Yeah.
certainly expanding on a Sunday isn't the direction I would think we ought to go.
okay.
I agree too.
So I don't know if you guys had any other just questions or concerns.
I think they looked at it and that's how they feel. I support however they feel on it.
Okay, so we will have that, it will be on the agenda tomorrow just to pass a set policy so that it's not just something that the staff's just said that we don't do anymore. So that'll be a policy direction directly from us. So, that's all I have.
Thank you. Item 5, discussion review of possible annexation of property near the St. George Airport. Denise, would you bring up that? Been visiting over the past year and a half with a gentleman by the name of Dan McKay, who's over the church properties. And this is just for your thought, and
This is,
I'm not suggesting we do anything. It actually will be the council's decision, but see those two red pieces where it says St. George future annexation and Washington future?
Yeah.
They would like to have the Washington future annexation annexed into St. George. The church would.
That's
And-
their fields area out there?
That's south of the airport.
Yeah, I know it. It's the field area.
South of,
They're
yeah.
big.
They've
they
got
want
a-
that to go into St. George?
Well, yeah. But visiting with Roger and Mike, there is kind of an issue because the green is us, and it would be real difficult for us to get utilities around that into our other green, our green below it. So
What's
Yeah.
the purple?
purple is the lollipop version.
That's the
That's
law,
whatever.
what is it, poppies. It's
That's those
sensitive-
lavender
sensitive
violet
species.
farm.
It's the desert
Yeah.
preserve stuff.
Yeah, it's
But-
sensitive species.
Their thinking and reasoning is, I don't know, but St. George already has their utilities up to those properties
I'm not interested.
where we don't.
How much land is that?
If they want to straighten out our line in the northerly part of the fields, I'd be interested in talking. If
Yeah.
they wanted to come and help us straighten that boundary there, then I'd be happy to help them out down there.
Oh, well,
Yeah,
I'm just bringing
I-
it to your
I-
attention. And
I don't like the idea. of
probably Dan will
creating
come
a
down and
peninsula in the
Dan will
middle
plead
of-
his case here in a
Is
little while.
so is this property currently county property or currently Washington City property?
It's county.
What I would say is that one is such a, and that boundary at the bottom is the state line, correct?
Mhm.
If we're gonna do it, we wouldn't keep the green underneath it, we would just annex the whole chunk.
Right.
That's exactly what I
And if
mentioned
the
to
church
Mayor.
wants to help us straighten out some lines to the north, let's talk.
Yeah, that was, when we first were approached as staff, that was the concern we had. I think this is an Ed Burgess development, is it not? That, I think, yeah, but I think that's what he wanted. Oh, no, it's still the church, I'm sorry. But we mentioned the concern about, we're not looping services around. That just doesn't make sense. So if the council was to consider anything, I would say you'd want to square that off and not create
But-
that problem for us.
My question is, if this is county property already, why do they even need,
Because it's in our annexation policy area.
This was part of the agreement.
how binding is that annexation plan though?
Well, it's pretty firm. When you have the overlap,
And that sits at the county level then, or how does that work? I'm not familiar with it.
well, Jeff may have to address how binding it is. Your biggest problem with your annexation policy plans, and the reason we got into problems with the airport properties, is we had overlapping policy plans. So both cities could claim rights to those lands. That's not, and what we've done since then, both with St. George and Hurricane, is we've created a bright line between so they would have to get Washington City to amend their annexation policy plans in order, and them amend their annexation policy plan before they begin the annexation process. So it's much stronger than if you have overlapping line, or overlapping plans, that's for sure.
So does the property owner want to sell this property to developers, or what
The
is it?
church owns it.
So the church as a property owner, do they want to sell this property or?
Yes.
I think that's their intent, is to sell the property.
All of their property in the fields area is for sale. Our family's actually been interested in buying some of, not this piece, but other pieces near our farm, and it's all on the market
If you
right amount of
buy
money.
this piece, that could solve some of this
Well,
problem.
I don't want that one.
Mayor, could this gentleman that you're working with, could he come in and discuss that?
Sure,
Because
he just wasn't able to, he had another commitment in Salt Lake, from Salt Lake, and so
well,
he's open to anything, I'm sure
maybe we could discuss some give and take a little bit on properties that.
well, you
that
take
they
that,
own.
we'll give him that, and
He
then
would
we'll
be
get
the one
credit
that
for the
you-
bridge.
What you'd want to do is bring St. George into that discussion, because he can't
Can't do that.
control what St. George is,
Yeah,
when we're talking about straightening other lines.
but there's even, yeah, that's true.
Well, no, they could, if the property owner came and said they wanted to be annexed into Washington.
Well, we'd have the same issue. St. George would then have to change their annexation, and we'd have to change.
Especially if it's St. George that has sent him on this errand to do it.
Yeah.
Well, I will say this.
If we don't do it, are we gonna end up in another fight with them?
Well, I don't know the answer to that, but I will say this, that there has been a much more delicate approach to this one than was done before. First of all, St. George has not even approached us. As a matter of fact, St. George has told them, you would have to get Washington to, this is what we're hearing from the property reserve, you would have to get Washington to agree to this. We're not going to take this fight to Washington. We're not going to go this route again. The church, of course, has a different person than was involved in the farmlands, which was very wise on the church's part because of how misleading we felt he was. And so they've approached this, of course, much more delicately, but irrespective of that, that's just staff's feelings, is that's a problem for us, just from a staff point of view.
I personally would like the future owner of this to come. I think, I would like to have a chance to visit with the potential buyer there to see what his concerns are with us.
Well, they don't want to be in Washington?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I would like to address and say,
Well,
what is your concern with
Part
that?
of, part of what happened, as I understand it, through the whole agreement with the airport and everything that went out there, was some of this property was going to be valuable for our economic development.
It's huge to us.
And so to give any of it up just because seems very concerning to me.
Well, that certainly is workable land. That's why they want to move it, that's why they want to develop it.
Right.
Because you can see the hillside there up at the upper right of the quadrant. That's
Yeah.
not, but that's all pretty flat. There's those church farms and that all down there. So I told the mayor, I just worry that at times the city council sat back and said, oh, you're right, the Black Ridge is never gonna be of interest to us. And you're right, Albertsons is never gonna be, or, you know,
Nobody's
Costco
ever-
is never gonna be of interest to
Nobody's
us.
gonna ever go up to Jay's swap meet,
That's
Yeah.
right.
and they did.
But our initial look was simply for the fact is it's problematic from a utility standpoint, and that was our initial look, and that's why we just said that is a problem for us.
And it may create technically a peninsula under the statutes. But we've also learned that any real grasp of that really depends on the holder of the definition.
Yeah, I would say it definitely does, because your peninsula definition is the circumference around can't be greater than the opening on the front. And I think just looking at that, you almost can say that's gonna be the case.
Yeah. How did that happen down in the north part of the fields?
Well, I think Jeff's right. That's the law. And depending on what side of who's petitioning for that,
Who's interpreting?
that to be reviewed.
I don't think any question that the arguments, the written arguments clearly show that the boundary commission went against what was clearly the law, but
Do we know how far south our utilities are pulled at this point?
Mike can answer that. I
There's
think it's
nothing
Warner
down
Valley,
there.
aren't they?
Yeah, we have water and sewer laid right out to the Warner Valley line, but we
So how
also-
far from this piece is that?
can you get from a road, what road
Do you have any idea?
About that
That
far.
goes
That far on the,
frontage road that goes
I was
down.
looking a little further on this screen.
It's probably, I would say,
It's a little further north than what you're seeing.
I would say probably 3/4 of a mile.
So the reality is if the developer wanted to do a development in St. George City and in Washington City, he could pull some utilities down from Washington, correct?
They can, yes.
And that's why this piece becomes a problem. So let's say the lower piece says, I want to go to
You
Washington.
gotta go around it.
They're gonna have
But
to
we
go
would be
around.
happy for him to develop a development that is
right
partially in
Oh,
the city
yeah.
of St. George and partially in Washington City.
You could do that either.
I believe these lower pieces are privately held. I think one of them's Warren Frisbee.
Yeah, I think you're right.
We'd have no problem doing that.
So,
And I don't know what where he'd like to go, but I know we have a very good relationship with Warren.
yeah. Well, and I think we'd roll out the red carpet for whoever potentially purchases this piece to come in and develop in our city.
As far as utilities, I don't know that one city could serve it better than the other,
Yeah,
especially now where we
Well, it
have
looks
the,
about the same distance, huh? Where you see the star on St.
Well,
George, maybe ours.
where we have the regional water supply agreement, and we have the wastewater is basically through the region.
And that's Dixie Power, right?
It's
So
Dixie
we don't know
Power.
We're just talking water.
So we're
and sewer.
talking water, sewer.
And ours is, we probably have better water and sewer up to that point.
We
than-
got, just
than
look
they
at the
do.
personalities, just look at the personal handling that they would have with Mike Shaw being the director of that.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that alone ought to tip it a bit.
Man, you about tore his shirt open with his puff chest. You about lost.
So,
Yeah.
Mike, can you tell how much land that is? I mean, how many acres is that?
Do you know?
Oh, we
more?
have it.
Did they tell you?
Isn't that on your paper, Mayor?
and they're on the paper, 243.68 acres, divided in half. Is that right, or is that the whole project?
No, I think that is that piece.
I don't
Well,
know. It doesn't
my
really
initial,
specify.
my reaction is, no. If they want to come and discuss it further and bring us some other ideas, then maybe we'll talk about it. But the way it looks now, just to say, would you be willing to give this up? No.
I would say they need to bring this other section into Washington.
Yeah, sounds good.
Could we send that? Yeah, let's send that over to them and.
Everything
Why don't
except for the
they-
violet.
Yeah, we don't
And
want
this
the
is the
violet.
reason you do have annexation policy plans, is you avoid this kind of,
I'm serious though, couldn't property reserve in St. George and Washington have a discussion and resolve this straighten out the line a little bit down there?
They'd be willing to,
If
certainly
they'd be
could.
willing to.
Oh, yeah, we
Just-
could.
To me,
We-
that seems to
We
be.
had this discussion, because they were going at the same time,
Yeah,
and they weren't willing to. I mean, they wanted it all. Like I said, that's why when the line gets drawn, I
That's
say,
the
we
line."
fought this battle once.
Yeah.
We don't want to give Mexico back again.
Right.
yeah. I hear you.
But we were pretty sensitive
I almost-
of these lines when we put them on the paper and sort of kind of cherry pick like this is, you're just gonna have cherry picking, and that's why the annexation policy plans try to avoid that. They try to keep landowners from pitting one city against another.
Yeah.
Yeah, but again, is the reason that the LDS Church is approaching us about this is because they have a developer who wants to develop all this through one city,
Well,
which
I'm
is
here to
not
tell you that
ours?
The last I heard.
I just,
The last I heard, Mike, this has been some time ago, but Ed Burgess has land right over here that he's developing. It was my understanding, it was Ed Burgess that said, I would like this land church, I approached it, but I want it in St. George, see if you can work that out. But that's probably been, a year and a half ago. But that's the last private owner I had heard, is that it was Ed Burgess, and he approached them and said, I would like this, but church, you need to go work it out with Washington. And St. George kind of said, yep, if you're gonna work it out, you go to Washington, we're not.
Church has put a whole
So is he using the
new
church?
language training facility out there and putting campus on it, with all kinds of retail on it.
Exactly. Language
Parents that
training
come and
center.
stay,
New MTC.
apartments around the
They're,
edges.
they're trying to expand the MTC.
So the direction I'll give him is we want to keep it.
Yep.
And we would be willing to have a discussion with him and St. George to
Well, I'd like to know
shore up the boundary.
what his concerns are.
yeah, does the church not think that Washington City can handle it? I'm frankly just a little bit
I think.
put
who'd
off
you
that they,
say?
well, does he not think that we can handle it?
I think it's the developer that's gone to them and said, I wanna be in St. George.
I'll
see
buy
if you
it
can
on
work
this
it out."
condition.
Yeah, I'll buy it on this
And
condition.
there's gotta be a reason he's saying that too, which is,
Well, because he has the land right next to, he has the
Well, I
land
know.
in St. George.
but still the fact of the matter is, there's nothing that would bar him from doing anything that joined along with those two communities.
I think it's just it's much simpler for him to keep it all in one community, go
One
through all
utility.
one process, all that. I think that honestly, at the end of the day, is the
Boundary down
issue.
the fields is so screwy. It's way easier to have our far southerly boundary tail off than it is to deal with that messy thing down in the fields.
You're not a kid.
get him to talk
And so,
You're not a kid. Yeah, we've doomed.
So that's the direction I'll go.
We've doomed a
Can
no
I,
man's land.
can I put this map up on here real quick?
You up for that, Ron?
Yeah.
That's the same map, I think, right?
Yeah, it's the same
yeah,
man.
it's just,
So here's my question.
Here's another version of it, Bill, if you want to see
Here's my
it.
question, Roger, and everybody. This is ours in our annexation plan right through here?
Yeah, I've got there's a piece of St. George. Do you know
See,
where
that's-
this?
That's that piece right there.
That starts to concern me that we haven't already annexed this stuff.
Well-
Because if they're wanting to do this, this to me is a bigger,
There's next.
Yeah, well, we can't annex anymore.
we can't.
No, you cannot annex by resolution anymore. That's not allowed in the state statute. It has to be landowner driven.
So landowners
But
own
that,
that.
this property where the lines are is already in the annexation plan,
Correct.
Yeah.
so there is some
That's what we did with the
lines
The
drawn.
big battle down there actually was we both amended our plans and said, okay, we agree your plans come to here, here's your plan, here's our plan, and this is the agreement. And it was,
But my concern is
Basically-
if we don't start working towards
Yeah.
it, they could come and say, hey, this makes way more sense to just cut it straight here.
You're right.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
the Peter, but the good news
Different
is,
property.
that's the Peterson bunch that,
okay, this is the Peterson piece. I don't know
Kept
if
us
this
in the
all
fight.
comes back to
That
you now.
wanted us.
yeah, this is
Yeah.
what saved our bacon.
Okay.
And quite frankly, the
But
Petersons,
they changed their mind, though.
the Petersons kind of helped facilitate the mess.
Okay.
And the Petersons have really tried to hang out there. The Petersons are a classic example why annexation policy plans are needed. Because the Petersons, much of the fight that happened between Washington and St. George revolved around that very piece of land that you're talking about. And we had actually encouraged them to annex sometime earlier. And then when St. George found out they were considering it, that's when St. George put the state, the tail on that state statute issue that says we couldn't annex within so many feet of the conical surface of the airport, blah, blah, blah. Well, so we've cleaned that up. That's the annexation policy plan now. So again, that's the difference between today and yesterday.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, you know, I'm not sure I have any greater confidence in the fact that the Petersons are gonna move quickly, but what the Petersons would have to do if they chose to do something else is they now have to go get 2 plans amended if they choose to continue to try to play games. They can't play the games they used to play.
Were they,
They're pitting both cities against each other.
okay.
So if I, remind me, Roger, on their annexation, request to us, it took in part of those properties. that
Yes,
are
there
now-
were 16, were they 16-acre parcels? Something like that, that were kind
So
of.
that's why we couldn't go ahead and honor that request, is because through the agreement,
Well,
they had to amend their.
No, the fact of the matter is they never filed it. And they were preparing to file it, but they never filed it with the city, even though we had asked them to. Okay, so what had happened is their annexation map, we saw it. It came right up and took these 16-acre.
Correct.
They were square 16-acre parcels along the
Against the
airport, wherever that is.
correct.
Just before they filed, because we could have probably made the claim had they filed the annexation that the state statute did not pertain to that particular annexation petition. They knew that, St. George knew that the plan had been drawn. They knew that, but every time we asked Peterson, get it filed, get it filed, get it filed, it didn't.
Correct.
And then on the last day of the legislature is when the law went into effect.
But that's when they did file, because that's what brought us in.
Yes, we then allowed, let's see, then we allowed them to file before the signing, I believe.
Correct, and that's what I say, that's what allowed us to have at least a card to even play the game with.
That's right.
And that's why I'm wondering, why did we never follow on through with that petition? Was it because those properties came out of that filing? That they had to
Yeah, there was a combination of a couple of things. First of all, the Petersons never continued on with it. And second of all, at that point, we were trying to figure out where we were going.
Yeah,
And who had jurisdiction, and who had,
Correct, the war began, I remember the war very well.
So the purple St. George greens us.
yeah, and part of the reason St. George has some kind of screwy boundary right there is St. George themselves owns a big parcel of land right there. It's St. George proper.
Oh, when they bought probably the
Yeah,
land for the
They
airport.
own a chunk of land, and so that was the reason. But the good news is the Southern Parkway might kind of just draw, take your pen and kind of show where that Southern Parkway, and kind of where it goes up into the green. So see, this still works good for us. The fact of the matter is this had less concern to us.
Yeah,
You know, because they kept coming back to the argument saying we had to pass this piece of legislation because we were worried about security of the airport. We didn't believe that argument, but that's what they said. So when we finally negotiated with St. George on this, we said, fine, you can keep this, but you got to back off the Southern Parkway, and we want the frontages on the Southern Parkway. That was
that's great. That's good for us.
So you saw what happened though, that lack of security, we jumped in there and stole an airplane and rammed it into the building.
Yeah.
That's just something.
If we'd have given it to them, we'd given it to them, that would never happened.
If you remember, the conical surface prohibited us from building anything from the airport all the way to the Hurricane Cliffs.
I thought it was clear up to
all
Home
Warner
Depot.
Valley and everything. We had to get permission from St. George to do any building or annexation.
That was your favorite senator too.
Stevie? Stevie boy?
Get 70% of, 60% of
All
what
right.
you passed, it's passed that last week and you never see it.
I thought that's how it was gonna go,
So we'd love to have them develop that piece in
In
Washington
Washington
City.
City, okay. That's what I'll tell
That's
him,
our
if he has an
answer.
issue with that, he
Yes,
can
we'd
come.
love to have you build here.
And I don't think it's gonna be any more sophisticated than that, that we were approached by a buyer who wanted us to see if he could bring it into St. George. I don't think it's gonna be any more sophisticated than that from their point of view.
Okay,
Let's just hear it.
all right.
No.
We'll move on to item 6. Discussion of placement of a Lions Club plaque in Washington City.
They brought it in.
Now the important stuff.
Well, like Councilman Segmiller said, that we probably shouldn't have anything in the medians like that. I agree with that, anything at all. But maybe we could accommodate by the water wheel or something.
Yeah.
I like having those meetings clear, you can see over them, you
Yeah.
can see through them, you can see
Correct.
past them.
It's one of the reasons we didn't want plants and things in there.
Correct.
And if we put their sign there, then we're gonna have somebody else asking, maybe a business down the road or whatever. I just
Well,
want.
I told the mayor, I like the look of the sign, it's a nice sign. I would like even the city maybe to look at a sign similar to that we put Welcome to Washington City. We don't just have the Lions Club, we have our
Chamber of
Chamber of Commerce sign on it, we have our
New
VFW
VFW.
sign on it. We've got some organizations in our city that if we're gonna do that, I think all of them ought to be
But
recognized.
smaller,
Yeah.
metal,
just a
easy to
smaller-
maintain, a
exactly.
little,
Something that says,
Yeah.
welcome to Washington
And
City.
it could be right there off to the side as you come across the bridge,
I
right
thought
there
around the
in
bridge,
the park.
yeah, that's where I thought.
Right by the park there.
I haven't looked exactly, but that's, my thought was around the bridge area.
What do you think, chief? Not you, chief, this chief.
On, I guess, the legal end of it, the AASHTO, which is the standards that we have to build our roads to, it wouldn't allow a sign of that size to be in that
Median.
median because of clear zone standards. And the wood posts that they're using, they're showing they're like 8x8 post. The largest wood post that AASHTO allows is a 4x4 post, but it also has a restriction of weight, and that looks like it's gonna be a pretty heavy sign as well.
Because of breakaway issues.
Because of breakaway issues if they're hit. So, you know, council could allow it, but in the AASHTO, they don't allow it within
Yeah.
the clear zones.
I think it just kind of, it kind of clutters the look of the road there, and that's not what we want to have Washington
Well,
City
it'd
look
be a
like.
prime sign, if you could be the one sign in the median, I mean, it's a great sign placement, but I just don't think it's appropriate.
I agree with you.
so what direction do we send back to the Lions Club? Do we, is that something maybe the staff can look at some options where a discrete sign could be? They may know better than us, or,
Could we approach Darren Walker and have him put it right in his little
Plan.
wishing well?
Yeah.
I think you can
Right
do
there.
I like
anything in a
Councilman
private
Turek's idea,
sign.
create a sign that
I like
welcome to
a
Washington.
city.
Washington, population, whatever, establish such and such, and then have a spot where.
And I like the suggestion, I don't know who made it, because we do have a number of civic organizations, but keep the civic organizations kind of uniform.
yeah,
Yeah.
and small, easy to maintain.
As far as the standards for the design, if we basically put it on the backside of the sidewalk, we're okay with the designation of that road, a low-speed urban arterial. We can go to the backside of the sidewalk with
So we can
something
find
like
some
that.
area along there. as
See, I
long as
think
we're back
right
to
there,
the
just on
sidewalk.
the, right there at the park, we have the property there already. We're not encroaching on anybody's personal property at that point.
Another option is, and it probably will be a little more expensive, but if you want to put a structure over the road.
See, I thought about
An
that too,
arch.
a metal.
We had
I
a
thought,
gentleman
you know,
from the Coral Canyon area, do you remember him? He's passed away now. As a matter of fact, he passed away trying to get this thing done, but he, every year would come in.
Welcome to local government.
And now the one thing I think we want to, from a location standpoint, I think one of the things that has become a symbol of Washington, it certainly is the water wheel with the Washington City, and I think it has the established date.
That's
doesn't
very
it?
nice.
And so I don't think we want to clutter that, but I think we can find a place.
Yeah, we ought to be able to raise money, I mean, we ought to have one of those nice,
I think
I've
the
got
Lions-
nice
The
big.
best place might be right down near
I-
Veterans
Get-
Park
get-
somewhere.
I think the Lions Club is up for putting up some money, aren't they, Chris? Weren't they talking about, or were they,
Who?
or was it just their sign they wanted to
Yeah,
buy?
I don't know on how much they would have to put towards it. I haven't had that discussion, although I do agree with Councilman Turek. I like, and you, with the idea of having it there. I just, the how's a little less discreet, or a little more discreet, less obtrusive.
But if we had a nice, a really nice, I mean, I think it'd be nice to go out, I mean, I think you could get some of our business sponsors, I mean, like Tuacahn does, just something that recognizes who helped do it, but have a really nice, some type of a welcoming, you know,
Yeah.
What about on the bridge, just thinking out loud? There's some spots right along the,
Where?
right on the bridge on Telegraph. Along the side of the bridge, there'd be some spots where you could cut something small in along there. It wouldn't necessarily say welcome to Washington, but you might have, I don't know, it's,
Yeah.
so,
I agree.
but how would you incorporate any of these civic organizations into
I
that
think you could
sign?
find a place to put the small placards for the civic organizations, couldn't you?
What I think we ought to do is we
Not on the water wheel, no.
create.
You think
the-
on the water wheel?
I think you create.
Well, I don't
the-
know, I'm not necessarily saying I mean, you got the Boy Scouts sign on the water wheel, I don't know why you wouldn't have the,
Didn't the Boy Scouts put that in? Wasn't
They
that,
did. and
I
if you
think
look
what we
at
do
it,
is
which I
we-
didn't notice until it was pointed out, the fleur-de-lis is on the water wheel.
It is?
Yeah.
Where?
All along the front edge, it's what, maybe 4 or 5 times the fleur-de-lis put around the edge of the water wheel?
What is the fleur de lis? What is that?
That's the scout sign.
Scout sign.
Yeah, I think that was Dusty Ott's scout project.
Oh, was it really?
Yeah,
And it was a scout project.
Oh.
Yeah, it was Dusty Ott.
Here's what I would say, Roger, is, you know the new parking lot at Veterans Park where the old house used to sit?
Mhm.
Just a sign that sits right there, parallel with the road.
That's what I think you do.
We do
I think
that.
you do the
But
park area,
as
for the
a
museum
Washington
area, that
City-
area. I think that's where you do
Washington
it.
City thinks it's civic organizations,
There you
or
go.
something like that.
I think
By
I,
the grain,
exactly
kind of
is
by the
that?
granary, somewhere right in there.
Near where the
that's what I
granary
came up
is.
to say. I think
Oh,
that's
yeah,
the place for it,
downhill.
is our,
Just have it
yeah, right
flat,
downtown.
facing the road.
It'd probably get more visibility right down here on a constant basis than just
I
flying
like
past
that
it.
idea.
I think that's where you do
Down
it.
by the granary.
Yeah, somewhere along
Oh,
right
yeah,
there
the
on
little-
Telegraph.
Rock granary.
Yeah,
Right
just
near
have
there.
it be in a sign of appreciation, and then those ones, I mean, there are a lot of organizations that put in time, and
Certainly. I like
We can look at that.
I think you
Okay,
could.
so I'll take back to the Lions Club that we're looking at a couple of options and to be a bit more patient with us and
Our
we'll find
medians
something.
aren't gonna be one of them.
And if they were thinking of contributing, I know they're probably thinking of contributing their sign.
Well, I think that would be at least appropriate. Give us their sign, but,
Yeah.
What drives this is the national organization of Lions Club is wanting to be more involved in communities by placing things like signage. I mean, when you used to drive up and down the old road, you know, Kanosh had the Lions Club thing, and Lee, you know, Hurricane had one, and
Well,
blah,
when I-
blah, blah, all
when
the
I
way
was-
up.
When I was
So-
in this Exchange Club over in St. George, they just
Yeah.
built buildings in the parks, so the gazebos and the stuff like
So-
that. If you look at them, they're all by the Exchange Club.
Well, that makes sense. Well, that makes sense too.
well, I think that they play a great role in our communities, and it's only appropriate that they are recognized. I don't think that sign's a bad thing. I just find the appropriate way in place, and I think Councilman Sigmiller's, I think he's on to it. so.
We got a baseball, softball complex that somebody wants to get built.
That's right.
Lions,
Lions Club.
Lions softball complex.
No, that was the original
They can have as
complex
big a
was the
sign as they
Lions.
want there.
There you go,
Head of the
Councilman.
Bradley Keith-
Mayor, can I just
Sure.
Signage.
touch upon two things that are not discussion items, so Denise doesn't have to have a problem with it.
Denise, you need to go pressure for that.
No, it's all right, Denise, it's not posted for tomorrow either. It's just, I don't know if you've had an opportunity to go see the Covington home. Matter of fact, one of the challenges with the Covington home immediately is that everybody wants to now rent the Covington.
Ran it for a reception.
I actually had a call the other day that I was all prepared to say, absolutely not. But then they gave me an interesting thing. I said, let me just ask the council about it. So basically, the call came in as a music video at the Covington home. So I was prepared to say, that's probably not what we're going to do there. But anyway, basically what it is,
Country or rap?
well, I had rap. I had rap in my mind going on. You know, with
The piano guys.
But anyway, what it is it's I about said Amway, United Way. United Way is doing a production in which they do with their nonprofits. They're going to distribute for their nonprofits, and actually they're doing it with, actually the videographers and that are doing it are the same ones that do the piano guys, if you're familiar with them.
Mhm.
And they would actually just like to be able to, they have a classical guitarist that's going to play they just need it for a couple hours inside the home, where they'd have one camera that they shoot this and then edit it down to something, but they'd need a couple hours and then maybe out on the front porch, and that would be it. And so my comment was, well, this may be asked, or are you looking at, you know, providing a payment of some sorts to the city, or are you asking the city, if approval is given, to just donate this? They said, well, we probably could provide something. Of course, our preference would be, because we're distributing these to the nonprofits and that we'd like the city to give us that time, and in exchange for that, if they'd be willing, of course, we'd have them in the credit section, any way you would like to be displayed in the credit section. So because it was much different than I thought in my mind, I told this Rebecca, who I talked to, I don't know her, I said, well, let me just bounce it off the council, and I can let you know tomorrow if they at least think it would be all right.
Speaking of bouncing off, was our roundabout sign hit again up on exit 13?
Yeah, it was hit about a month and a half ago. A drunk decided that he could go straight.
Go bounce off it again.
And actually, that is all
Is
the
that
bids.
why you're on crutches?
Yeah, we did the bids and everything. It's quite pricey, as a matter of fact. But the insurance is covering it, which was the good thing, is law
Here's my thing,
enforcement.
Are the drunks getting off of the interstate? Or
This one, I
just
think, was
coming
getting off
across
the
in front of
interstate
truck?
and trying to go straight through.
I mean, because that sign's got a bad past. I mean, it's got history.
We're 2 for 2.
We're 2 for 2.
Exactly.
And we needed the whole sign replaced this time. That's where the expense was, with the lettering. Last time we replaced a couple letters and they never really matched all that well, and so it kind of looked oddballish, but he did a good job, pretty well taking out everything this time. Anyway, so did that answer that? And now maybe give me an idea on the...
My initial thought is, I don't necessarily have a concern with it, but it comes back to the same concern that we have about renting on Sunday. If we allow one group to use it, are we opening ourselves up that we have to allow every group to use it?
Well, I do agree with what Councilman Segmiller has talked about for some time, and that is probably some policy from the council's direction is going to be necessary, and probably relatively soon, because I will tell you that is that really has caught everybody's attention, that facility up there. And now we got weddings being asked about, and Barry and I's position is, you know, we can't answer that. The council's been reviewing it. We'll let you know if your wedding comes and goes without a decision. Well, I'm sorry that your wedding came and went. But, so I agree with Councilman Segmiller. That does need to be addressed.
Is staff waiting for us to begin that discussion, or is it just something we haven't been ready to have because we're not there
No,
yet?
I think staff is, I think it's been talked about enough on the council level that the staff's bright enough to know that the council ought to have that discussion and not probably take that discussion from
So
the
maybe we can
council.
start that discussion in a couple of weeks and everybody bring your ideas of what we can or cannot be doing there.
Okay, and in the meantime, because this one, they're gonna shoot,
I
they're
would
gonna
say
shoot the next
absolutely
week.
yes, and I'm glad they asked. It's a beautiful home, we should show it off, and, I mean, they could have done the outside probably without even us knowing, so I would completely support it.
For the time being, and if you do agree to do that, just have at least it based on something such as, we think it'd be a great promotion through an organization like that.
Yeah,
To
we
be able
could-
to have the city's name on the credits and stuff.
Yeah,
It's
we
great
could-
exposure.
Something to-
Make sure we have that
Well,
in
do
the
we want
credits.
exposure for it? That's
And I don't
that's
get-
where the policy
I
comes
don't
back.
get
Do we
too-
want exposure for it?
I don't
What's the
get too
exposure for it?
stressed a lot of times when we worry about certain precedent issues. I think sometimes I don't get too stressed about those. I
Well,
usually
this
get
one
more
might be soon enough
stressed.
on the edge that it wouldn't
That's-
matter.
I
think
agree.
There's a huge difference on opening up what we already have established as a 5-year-old building, and then we're opening up for Sunday just for one group. I think the committee handled that just
What's the noise level gonna
appropriate.
be? What's the impact gonna be on neighbors?
They don't anticipate, again.
It's
I
an
didn't-
acoustic
Will it be
guitar?
Inside or
No,
outside?
no, it's classical.
Classical acoustic guitar.
Well, don't get
You didn't have
fancy
an
dancy
amp-
with
you
me.
didn't
I
have
have
an
no
amplifier.
idea what that means.
Make it a
Will there
It's a
be
guitar. It's got
amps?
some strings and a big neck.
It's a guitar.
All I know is the neighbors up around it they love people
I do
around
not
there.
think
They
that
Well,
love
they,
to see.
they will until somebody has a reception
Yeah.
or something and they can't get in their driveways, so.
I didn't ask the question, but
Oh, we've had them stacked up through Washington City night.
Yeah.
I didn't ask the question, but I didn't anticipate this is gonna be really intrusive.
Okay.
I still think that, you know, if we do it here, we probably need sooner or later get that policy in place. Because I see the floodgates opening, as Roger says, and.
I think,
Can we put
I think
that-
if we have that on the agenda in 2 weeks, we can have that
2 weeks
discussion.
or
Let's do it.
the first week in June.
I would say it's fine. My vote is yay for it.
Me too.
Yeah, I'm okay.
I think our construction workers and parks people probably made more noise while they were working on the yard. Well, I'm sure of that, with the cement.
It's gorgeous, so, yeah. Looks good, Barry. It looks very good, Barry.
Then we get those fish.
Okay, so I'm gonna kind of move forward
Yeah,
on
go
this
ahead.
one. Okay. Then one last thing that's not a discussion item is, Ruth had forwarded you a potential buyout. We actually want to drop that. We've come across some additional complication a little bit with that, and so,
We're reevaluating.
we are reevaluating, and quite frankly, we're probably looking at nothing higher than a 15%. And part of the reason for that, here's the complication that came up today. We had open enrollment today for our employees, and so we had the trust here, we had PHP, and it was a mandatory open enrollment, which was good, because we rarely have all the staff when we get opportunity to talk to all the staff. So I had the opportunity to talk to staff about other, benefits and wages and all of that, and I think it was a good day. But One of the things the trust brought up, as well as PEHP, is if you have too many people withdraw, you will lose your coverage across the board.
Oh, your participation.
And so that's just a little complication that we want to take into consideration. And so,
What's the percentage?
You're saying
where you lose
40% might
your
be
coverage?
too enticing?
too enticing. And so we're trying to dance on the head of a pin here by saying we want to make it enticing enough that if they truly don't want to have, let's say, the family coverage, they pull out. That certainly benefits us. But on the flip side, if it's too enticing and you have too many people that say, listen, if I can make more with what you're cashing me out to pay the difference of how poor my wife or husband's insurance is, then I'm just going to do that, then that all of a sudden can create a huge ripple effect across the city that may not be what we intended to begin with.
And what is that cutoff line to where we'd lose coverage? Is it based on a percentage of the total employee?
It is kind of based upon the percentage, but it equates to approximately 25 employees is all.
What I would worry is that those 25 employees are healthy employees that actually contribute to the profitable group that we have.
Keep your rates.
And not just lose, we lose premium on
So we're
healthy people going elsewhere and you end up having a little bit of adverse selection that.
Which was some of the concerns we had with, when we
yeah.
started discussing HSAs and things, of how to make those.
I mean, we don't want to cut our nose off to spite our face.
really
Because we
just
can't
looking-
choose who goes, but if we could pick and choose, look at the history and.
Right now, we're
The
really
healthier
just
people
looking
make more
for,
sense for
we're
them.
looking
First
for those people that
25, and
help.
then you're gonna be analyzed.
I'm sorry, Councilman.
Well, right now, we're just trying to encourage those that are double covered. So maybe take some.
I
take
thought
some
we
of
only
the-
had 11 that were double covered.
Well, more have
Fit
come
into
forward,
that.
too.
Well, I was gonna say that you know of, but see, I can see the same scenario, because at my work, I could pick up insurance for $400. If my wife can save 500,
That's right.
we come 100 positive to go to a different place.
And then that hurts the people with the intention of the insurance in the
Lower
first place.
premiums collected, and you may have had healthy people leave and the.
So
Then- then
that
next
was
year
a,
you take
that was
beating
a,
on your pool.
a complication we didn't anticipate. Now, just so you know, the percentage, how we've approached the employees is just simply, if you have an interest, please mark it on the sheet, turn it in. We have not determined what that would be, and when we do determine it, it may not be,
So are
may not be
we,
what
are
you
we
want.
working with them to help us come up with the percentage with PHP and,
Yeah, PHP actually came and said, I don't know why you're doing this. Why would you offer anything? And I says, well, because again, we've got a little different mix, and it is positive for us if we don't have to pay a family rate
Right.
in exchange for whatever. And the problem is a lot of cities don't do this, and we chose, of course, this year to dilute a benefit instead of add a contribution. It's easier to do this, to not to offer zero when you've got a contribution already in place.
right, okay.
So, anyway, that probably would be the maximum of our recommendation, but I guess my biggest point is Ruth is still churning this over, and I'll have her just send it
So
out to you.
maybe
I
this
knew-
year we don't do it and we just think about it a little more until we
And we
figure it
could.
out.
I'll tell you, I'd just as soon be safe than sorry
Yeah, absolutely.
on this issue. Find out we made a decision we wish we wouldn't have.
Okay.
Fair.
I have no more non-discussion.
Mayor, if there's nothing else, I will move that we adjourn.
I'll second that one.
There's a motion and a second to adjourn.
Truman, aye.
Hudson, aye.
Seg Miller, aye.
Very good.
Just a reminder, tomorrow, gentlemen, make good decisions, will you? I won't be here, so make those good decisions.
You got it.
You might.
Our renewal